What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports Talk on Tap podcast. We're here. It's mainly a Minnesota sports podcast, but we're here to talk all things sports. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking at the Western Conference Finals, Game 3 between the Oklahoma City Thunder and Minnesota Timberwolves, as well as a little preview tonight between the Indiana Pacers and New York Knicks. Now, for anyone that's watched us before, I myself, Jake, am a huge Minnesota sports fan. And coming into Game 3 last night, I did not have a lot of confidence. Obviously, the first two games in Oklahoma City were kind of dominant wins. Game 1, Minnesota led for the first half, but Oklahoma City, both games 1 and 2, just came out swinging in the third quarter and also kind of burying the Wolves. The game 1 ended up getting destroyed, losing by like close to 30 points by the end. In game 2, while they put up a closer fight, still lost by double digits. SGA, another 30-point game. And, it was very concerning because Oklahoma City, even in the first two games, weren't shooting the ball that great. And in game 2, Anthony Edwards, despite, going 1 for 9 from the three, had over 30 points, I believe 0 turnovers, and had close to 9, 10 rebounds. And he was kind of doing all he can, and they still weren't really close to win the game at all. And that's kind of, when I myself, as a Minnesota sports fan, get all nervous and thought, the series is over. But, they end up surprisingly being the 40 plus points last night. It was a great game all around, but definitely a couple different topics we got to talk about. But first, obviously, we'll start with Anthony Edwards. And going back to that home crowd, the Timberwolves, the energy early, and Anthony Edwards set the tone early with 16 first quarter points. And I believe he had like 12 in the first minutes when it was a 21-9. So the first 6 minutes. So he came out setting a tone. And that's what Anthony Edwards does at age 23. It's still remarkable that he's gone to back-to-back conference finals at just age, being the main leader on the team, obviously the best player on the team both times. And he came up short last year. And while I still think they'll come up short this time around, it was just great to see that bounce back and just shows he can go toe-to-toe with the MVP and SG. And the Timberwolves just had a great game plan. I don't know what happened. And obviously, I would say, despite how good Anthony Edwards was, the key headliner was Terrence Shannon Jr., obviously a late first-round pick from the Timberwolves. Had some good games against Oklahoma City in the regular season when they split 2 out of 2, which is why a lot of people thought going into this matchup that it could be a good series. But overall, didn't play him at all the first two games besides a little bit of garbage time. And then this game, Terrence Shannon Jr. gets the call, shoots 5 of 8 from the field, was aggressive, had a nice and one. I believe that was his first basket of the game. Kind of set the tone in the first quarter. Ended up the game with 15 points. It was obviously just a huge spark for them, knocking down a 3 ball. And, I think they needed that energy. And the crowd fed off it, got a big standing ovation. They even talked post game, with Naz Reid, how he gets, that Minnesota love. Terrence Shannon Jr. almost got a big of an ovation from the crowd, as Naz Reid did. So that's how you know the crowd was dying for Chris Finch to make some changes when you're down 0-2. Kind of, you have to throw everything at the wall because obviously no team has come back from a 3-0 deficit. So if they lost yesterday, the series was essentially over, even though I'd still keep maybe a 0.1% of hope, just, as a Minnesota sports fan. But thankfully, they didn't need to worry about that. They're pretty much in cruise control the whole game, ended up going up by 20 at the end of the first, 30 plus by the end of the second at half. And then the Thunder came out once again the third quarter, swing a little bit, probably their best punch of the night, an 11-2 run. But ultimately, still wasn't enough. The Timberwolves immediately called it timeout, bounced back, and went on a 25 run on their own. However, if I'm a Minnesota sports fan, and while this win is great, this isn't, this at the end of the day, it's just one game. Oklahoma City is still leading the series 2-1. They're definitely, in my opinion, like the better team still. While I think the Timberwolves at their peak can beat them, they got to be at this level constantly. And while obviously I'm not shoot 50% from 3-point range again, I'm not expecting them to shoot as poorly as they did. And Dante DiVincenzo, it was good, even though he only had 6 points. He only took 2 3-pointers, made both, made one in the first quarter, and I think that kind of brought a big sigh of relief. Naz Reid, who was 0 for 10 in the first two games, finally started knocking down some shots. He finished with 10 points, played some great defense, had a nice block. Overall, this was just a great team effort. The bench came back to provide a spark. Nikhil Alexander-Walker hit some threes, and then obviously Terrence Shannon Jr. being that ninth man in the rotation before garbage time, kind of set the tone for what this uh, series can be, and it can be a dogfight. And the Timberwolves can't compete. They deserved. They kind of, showed why they deserve to be here. The national media writing it off, and it's still, very much Oklahoma City could win the series in five, but the Timberwolves showed why they can be here, despite how good the Thunder are. 68 win team, best net rating since the '96 Bulls for NBA. I think the best in NBA history. So, OKC's defense, especially, is historically great, but they're able to fluster SGA. And when the Timberwolves can play physical and the refs aren't making a lot of calls to get SGA to the line and kind of get him into a rhythm before he can start knocking down his mid-range game. That's kind of what they played into the Timberwolves City. While the percent looks great when they're taking a lot of contested threes and kind of rushed. Walk through this. But, at the end of the day, it's still only one game, and Oklahoma City's looking at this 2-1. They can steal home court, which would be huge for them, and to go up 3-1 and almost essentially, I think, kind of erase what game three was, kind of, put the series to bed, possibly back in OKC in game five. But for the Timberwolves, they got this mentality, like Julius Randle said, it's just one game in the post game. We got to do it again. And they got to go out there tomorrow night and prove why they belong, tie the series up at two, and then try and steal one in OKC, because when it's 2-2, the pressure's kind of off. You're playing with money going back to OKC, but the pressure's all on you on game four now. You prove that you can beat this team. You've almost beat them by 50. Can you do it again? Can you go out there? Can Anthony Edwards knock it off to a slow start? Can he set the tone? Can the role players like Naz Reid, Dante DiVincenzo, Jay McDaniels knock down their shots? Can Terrence Shannon Jr. provide the same spark? That will be, a lot of good questions. Julius Randle had a nice bounce back game after getting benched the entire fourth quarter in game two. And I didn't really understand that. I know he was having an off game 2 for 11, but I mean, he was definitely, I think, in my opinion, their best player through the first two rounds. And chose not to ride him out, but maybe that was a good response because he was long in the last night, an efficient 24 points. They were sharing the ball, not a lot of turnovers at all. So that was great to see. Overall, yeah, I mean, pretty much a perfect game for Minnesota. Almost unrealistic to happen twice against this great of a team, but can you at least shoot that 37 to 40% from three, play good defense, just try and fluster SGA? It will obviously depend, kind of what game the refs are calling, but for OKC, can someone else help out SGA because he can't do it all by himself? Jalen Williams, obviously, kind of a no-show yesterday. And, they're still a young team. So they're kind of getting deeper into this Western Conference Finals. Will they be able to have the stamina to keep up, or will shots, start to miss more? And we're seeing that with the three-point range, the three ball not falling. But Chet Holmgren, only 10 points, not a big impact. Who on OKC can step up and, help if, it's the same thing. It's a physical game, and he's, not going to the line as much. He's still a great player, so he's going to get his bounce back game to around like 25 points, at least get there if it's physical. But, if SGA is able to bait them and he does a good job of, drawing contact and can get to the line, get into rhythm, does he have another 35-point game? That's going to be interesting to see what game four is, because I think game four, I don't want to say the winner of this game wins the series, but OKC, I mean, obviously, if they win up 3-1, head back home, are in great hands. But Minnesota winning games now have all the momentum going back to OKC. I don't know. And, as a Timberwolves fan, I'll try to remain optimistic because, if we can go back 2-2, I really like our chances. But, still, the series doesn't start until the home team loses. And, it was just great. I was expecting a Timberwolves win in my bias hope for last second, but no one in their right mind was expecting the 40-plus point win that they had. And it was even that before the starters got pulled. It was just kind of a weird game. It's been a weird series where OKC looked so dominant in the first two. The defense was swarming. Anthony Edwards hit a shot. It looked like kind of this was potentially going to be a sweep or even a gentleman's sweep. And while the gentleman's sweep is still possible, a 40-point win, Timberwolves kind of erased some of their doubters and kind of, said, we belong and we can, make some noise here. And even against a great team like the Thunder. So yeah, that was a great win, and for at least another day, I can enjoy it before Monday night's Memorial Day game, where obviously all hands on deck still. But that Minnesota crowd was rocking, and I think it really shows, even though it's not like the NFL, how big of a factor home court is, especially for great fan bases like the Thunder and the Timberwolves, because those play and like Julius Randle said, we home now. So that was great to see, and they definitely fed off that energy. But yeah, now looking ahead to the next game, tonight's game, a very important game 3 in the Eastern Conference Finals between the New York Knicks and Indiana Pacers. Indiana leads 2-0. I mean, nothing much to say on what happened in game 1. That was obviously a big choke job by the Knicks. The series should really be 1-1, but even game 2, close down to the wire. Brunson can't hit the game tying 3. The Knicks bench Karl Anthony Towns for defensive purposes because he was having a rough game on defense. Uh, and now New York has already come out before the game, and so they're making a lineup change. Mitchell Robinson will be played big with Cat 5 and Mitchell Robinson beast on the boards. But the series, even though I like the Knicks, because everyone knows I'm a Timberwolves fan, Anthony Towns still has a special part for what he did for the city, what happened last year, that run, being able to beat the champs, and then kind of getting traded. He remained loyal, but he lit it up with the Knicks this year. But we're still seeing some of those defensive woes, and they're going to try and play into his strength, playing him with the 4. I think that's a good move, and I think Josh Hart will understand, coming off the bench. At this point, you got to throw everything at the wall because you're heading back to Indiana. You lost both games at home at MSG, and now you're going on the road to Indiana, where Indiana has been amazing at home this whole playoffs. They're going to try, at least get one at home before heading back to MSG. I don't think they'll get both. But if, like I said, if Indiana wins, it's 3-0. No one has ever come back from 3-0. So the series is over. So the Knicks need this one tonight. And just based on what history tells us. And I think playing Mitchell Robinson at the 5 will be great. I think he's been one of the few bright spots. Brunson has also been really good in this series. But, that last possession that he had in the game time 3, I thought he rushed it. Didn't really get anyone into a rhythm. And while I understand why he's obviously taken the last shot, I feel like you could have waited a little bit to try and get a better shot. But obviously, looking back at game 1, how Indiana was able to come back. Aaron Nesmith, hell of a series so far. Really ain't missing from 3. It's just been different players stepping up. Early in game 2, Pascal Siakam was cooking. Tyrese Halliburton, obviously the game tire. And, he's just made his mark with his playmaking in the series. Shooting has been great. And overall, Indiana's playing with house money now, going back home. Their job, just win one. I think this, heading into the series, even as a big Knicks fan, I think the Pacers are just the more complete team, more depth when you can go to, Obi Toppin, Benedict Mathurin, and TJ McConnell off the bench. This team has just got so many different ways to score, and they try on defense. And while they're not the best defensive team, they're trying, which is what I think the difference is between this year and last year with their full court press. And you can tell it's kind of taking a toll on the Knicks, that even though they beat the Celtics, which was a great surprise, the deeper you get in and the shorter your rotation is, the harder it is. Some of those shots are not going to start falling because you're fatigued. And we know how Tom Thibodeau plays his starters for 40-plus minutes a night. That can definitely be a factor. And so they need to find it from somewhere else. Can Deuce McBride, who's going to, have that game where they can just steal it? Obviously, Jalen Brunson's going to do his thing, but can Karl Anthony Towns, like in game 1, he had 35 in New York. Still can't believe they lost that game. Unfortunately, it was a disaster ending. But they got to find a way. Adversity at its finest. Can they overcome and, somehow win both? But definitely at least one here heading back to New York. I think it'll be interesting to see how Indiana matches up with this double big lineup. So when it's, happened in these games so far, Indiana's found a way. Mitchell Robinson is feasting on the boards, but they're trying to maximize Cat's versatility on defense, where he's not really good at center, but at power forward, we saw with the Timberwolves last year how good he could be paired with Rudy. And while that may limit the offense a little bit, unfortunately, that's the risk you have to take. And you're just going to have to hope OG, Mikal, Brunson, Cat can just hit their shots. Mitchell Robinson, when he goes to line, can hit them. But yeah, swing from Tom Thibodeau, it's kind of a desperation move, but it's a desperate time right now. And so nothing but respect there. But yeah, uh, for me, obviously being a Cat fan, I hope New York can come back in the series, but also just to make it interesting because when both teams were up 2-0, we were potentially, at least in the Thunder series, looking at a sweep. Thankfully, my Timberwolves were able to pull it out. But this one too, no one likes to see a sweep or a gentleman sweep. So can New York just both games have been extremely close, but can they win one of these close games? And we thought they could, with Jalen Brunson winning Clutch Player of the Year for a reason and what he did in that Celtics series and what they back in, those first two games down by 20 to close it out. Can they do the same thing now? But Indiana has just been the better team in the clutch. They have a bunch of different players they can go to. While New York, it's kind of, one dimensional Brunson ISO holding the ball. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. Obviously, the Indiana crowd is going to be electric. The Pacers, obviously, going to back-to-back ECFs. Last year, falling up short, even though it was a sweep against the Celtics. They played really well, and all those games were close down the wire, even without Tyrese Halliburton. Some of those. It'll be interesting to see what they can do, though. If they obviously win both, that'd be a very surprising sweep, even though I had the Pacers winning just because of how close these teams are in talent. But this kind of reminds me of a lot, unfortunately, like the Timberwolves Mavericks series last year in the Western Conference Finals, where every game besides the last one was a wire, just who can execute better in the clutch. And that was Luke and Kyrie, some of the best closers. Tyrese Halliburton has been one of the best closers so far, along with Jalen Brunson. Unfortunately, the Knicks just haven't been able to close in the clutch. And now Indiana's proven that they can. And now they're playing with all the momentum now heading back home. So I'm expecting them to at least win one of these two. But for me, just get one, really all you can ask for. But yeah, overall so far, the both series have been electric in different ways. Obviously, blowouts aren't fun, but it was great to see the punch back, even as a Wolves fan. But hopefully, we get an exciting game 4, and hopefully, we get an exciting game 3 tonight. Hopefully, the Knicks win. I like the Knicks, but just for a bit longer series because we don't want to have to wait a week if both end like in 5 and like an Indiana sweep. But yeah, overall, was very good, and hopefully, we can get a masterclass. Is a big supporter tonight. We'll be rooting for him. But thank you guys listening. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. We're going to be talking basketball stuff, and we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.